This
is TLV1.
TLV1 radio.
Great mixture.
I like Tel Aviv.
This is still V1.
This is
Tel Aviv is a beautiful city.
Great city, great radio.
TLV1.
This is TLV1.
The Tel Aviv Review with Gilad Halpern.
Hello and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review, a program dedicated to the word, to the thought and to debate. I'm your host Gilad Halpern, and every week I'll be talking to writers, scholars, researchers, documentary filmmakers, or just people who have made our lives a tad more interesting. And on today's show, our guests are Professor Smadar Lavie, a world-renowned anthropologist and author of the recently published Wrapped in the Flag of Israel, Mizrahi Single Mothers and Bureaucratic Torture. She will tell us about the modalities of race and gender in contemporary Israel and, having been subject to institutional harassment, including being stripped of her passport for more than 8 years, how she became immersed in her own study. This is The Beauty of Anthropology. Our second guest will be Dr. Eran Dorfman, Senior Lecturer in French and Literature at Tel Aviv University and author of the recently published Foundations of the Everyday, Shock, Deferral, Repetition. It focuses on the periphery of the everyday experience and will share with us the mechanisms that prevent our daily lives from becoming unchanging and monotonous, contrary to how they're often interpreted. Thought your life was boring? Think again. Well, that could be said about the Tel Aviv Review in general, or at least what we're aspiring to do. In any event, stay with us and we'll be right back.
Meeting you with a view to waking, face to face in secret places, feel the chill. Nightfall covers me, but you know oversea. Could it be the whole of opening wide? A sacred why, a mystery gaping inside. The weekends why, until we dance into the fire. That fatal kiss is all we need. The fire to fatal sounds of broken dreams. Dance into the fire. That fatal kiss is all we need. Dance into the fire. Choice for you is the view to waking. Between the shades, assassination, standing still. First crystal tears fall as snowflakes on your body. First time in years to drench your skin with lover's rosy stain. A chance to find the phoenix for the flame. A chance to die, but can we dance into the
This is TLV1 broadcasting from Tel Aviv on TLV1.fm, and you're listening to the Tel Aviv Review. I am Gilad Halpern, and I'm now delighted to be joined here in the studio by Professor Smadar Lavie. She's a world-renowned anthropologist, scholar in residence at the Beatrice Spain Research Group at UC Berkeley, and University College Cork, Ireland. She's the author of Wrapped in the Flag of Israel, Mizrahi's Single Mothers and Bureaucratic Torture, that was recently published in English by Berghahn Books, and we're here to discuss this. Hello, Smadar, and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review.
Thank you.
So let's start with a more general point. The uniqueness of anthropology, as opposed to other social sciences, is that it allows perhaps the greatest degree of personal involvement on the part of the researcher in the subject of his or her study. Now, in your case, in this particular case, this was particularly true and particularly poignant.
Yeah, in anthropology, usually our methodology is fieldwork or like immersion in the lives and words of the people we study. I myself had the privilege and the misfortune, in a sense, of having a complete overlap between my life and the life of the women I studied. I arrived in Israel in 1999. I had to flee California with my son. We were victims of domestic violence that was not treated as it should have by the California family courts. I was in litigation for 2 years, after which all levels of the Israeli court decided that I didn't snatch my child, but I saved his and my life from domestic violence. However, the Israeli regime was quite enthused to have the opportunity of someone who's been a very vocal critic of its policies towards the Palestinians and towards its majority citizenry, who are Jews who arrived in Palestine and then Israel from the Muslim world and the margins of the Ottoman Empire, or Jews who are called Mizrahim or Easterners. So I was at the time conducting the first ever anthropological research in the here and now and collecting testimonials in the past on racism against Mizrahi Jews and the way that it relates to the question of Palestine. And the regime was very enthused that I was there in Israel. Right when I was cleared of all accusations of child snatch, they confiscated my Israeli passport and my son's Israeli passport. I'm a dual citizen, both U.S. and Israeli. And as a dual citizen, the law says that you have to get into Israel and leave Israel only on your Israeli passport. So I was without a passport. I could not go back to my job at the University of California. This happened right when my appointment for a full professor with tenure went through. In Israel, I'm not allowed to work.
Why not?
Because I'm not a Zionist, which is, I have some questions about the viability of a Jewish state in mandatory Palestine the way it is now. And also because
there are some Israeli professors who have the same questions about the Jewish
they are
state.
Ashkenazim.
So you think your Mizrahi identity played a crucial role
Yes,
in...
my Mizrahi identity and pro-Palestine politics. At the time when I arrived in Israel in 1999, out of the 1,600 women professors in Israeli universities, there were only 18 who are Mizrahi. 15 of them were wealthily and happily married to upper-class Ashkenazim and thanked their husbands and their husbands' families for their career. I know that because I have a student who did an MA on it.
Right.
And the other 3 were not raised in Israel. 2 of them were raised in France. of North African origin, and they arrived in Israel fait accompli as a product of the French education system. And one of them, who was married to a Mizrahi, came from a very wealthy Iraqi Jewish family. So to have
But it's
someone...
not because they weren't allowed to have a job here. It's
No,
because
it's because of
there were victims, in a way, members of two underprivileged societies, Mizrahi and women.
I don't think that Israeli women are underprivileged when it comes to university appointments, because studies show that it takes a woman about 20 years to start making money out of her academic position if she is a mother, like most Israeli women are, and takes care of her kids. Ashkenazi women can afford it because of intergenerational wealth transmission, because of marriage. They rely on their in-laws and on their parents, and for the first 20 years of their career, they're basically not breaking even. Mizrahi women don't come usually from this privileged setting unless they marry wealthily placed Ashkenazim, so they cannot afford to leave 20 years in debt until they are established in their career. But back to my story. The regime basically stopped my career. I am not allowed to work in Israel because even if I were a Zionist, most of the Mizrahi women professors in Israel, mind you, in 1999, it's like 18 out of 1,600. They are in the applied sciences. So if things don't work out well in the country club, they can go and work in private industry. There are very, very few women, Mizrahi women, in the humanities and the non-applied social sciences, let alone women who do understand the history of Israel and the Palestine conflict, from a critical, empirical point of view, not from the point of view of the Israeli propaganda.
So where does it meet the other subjects of your study, namely Viki, Knafo, but others, Mizrahi single mothers who come from very underprivileged backgrounds? Because at the end of the day, you had a very significant asset, which is your education, which most of them, virtually all of them, did not have.
Yeah, that's true. My education helped me, and it helped me also to write this book, which is half a memoir and half diligently researched social science book. I guess these women are underprivileged, but I wouldn't single them out. I would say that 50% of Israeli citizens are underprivileged because of racial discrimination. In Israel, there is an exact parallel between race and class. And perhaps for that, for the English-speaking audience, we need to go to the demographics of Israel, which are not very much known outside this country. 20% of Israeli citizens are Palestinians who were allowed to stay after the Nakba, or the expulsion of the majority of Palestinians from Palestine in 1948. 50% of the citizens are Mizrahim, and they usually populate the lower classes or the lower middle class. And they don't even have majoritarian rights as a majority. The country is ruled still by 30% Ashkenazim. These are Jews who arrived from Eastern Europe or English-speaking countries to which Eastern European Jews immigrated. And many of them arrived after the Holocaust. And this created a class gap. It is because Jews who are Holocaust survivors received reparation payments. This is like peanuts compared to the horrendous suffering and trauma which is beyond words that Jews survived under the Nazis. However, this created a very big income gap between Ashkenazim, who got hard currency as reparation money,
that still
and
persists
Mizrahim.
today. That's a question, because it was 2 or 3 generations ago.
Yeah, because if you look at intergenerational transmissions of wealth, if you look at the composition of the CEOs of companies, the composition of the academia. For example, 95% of Israeli faculty or Israeli professors are Ashkenazim still. It's not that we are dumb, even though we got inferior education. Most of the broadcasting entities, people who, the image in advertisements is of light-colored people. Usually the ideal of beauty is Nordic, even though this is completely not Semitic as far as Ashkenazim go. At any rate, to go back to history, most Mizrahim vote Likud. They're right-wing.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. I want to ask you about the protagonist of your book, Viki Knafo, that you chose as her struggle as the standard bearer of the struggle of Mizrahi women. What can you tell us about her, and why did you choose to focus on her in particular?
She's not the protagonist of my book. I take the march of Viki Knafo and I dissect it day by day with its chronology. But basically, the protagonist of my book is the failed Mizrahi struggle. Because I argue that social justice movements in Israel are doomed to fail. And this is because every time there is social unrest in Israel with regard to this intra-Jewish racism that has to do also with class, for some odd reason, there is a war that breaks out. There is a suicide bomber who slips through. There is yet another bloodletting cycle. And then the Jewish population of Israel gets into this modus of, we call it one people, one heart. And all of the seams that are like bursting on the Jewish fabric of the society get mended temporarily against these ominous Arab goyim, and then the society can move on. So I'm looking at the fact that this makes the social struggles in Israel unsuccessful, and it is a situation that will continue the warmongering of Israel vis-a-vis its neighbor.
But social struggles in general, I'm trying to understand to what extent they overlap with the so-called ethnic division, the Mizrahi plight.
They're parallel, completely parallel. And
because we saw in 2011, which is 8 years after Viki Knafo's struggle.
Yeah, my book ends with 2011.
Exactly.
It was a complete failure.
Yeah, but it wasn't along racial or ethnic lines. It was
was
an all-Israeli sort of struggle.
Yes, it was, and this is why it failed. The leadership of the 2011 Occupy were wealthily placed Ashkenazim who were basically priced out of their shishi apartments in Tel Aviv. And the majority of the demonstrators, like the majority of Israeli citizenry, were Mizrahim. They didn't feel represented. And the Palestinians who are citizens of Israel avoided largely participating because in order to reach a large-scale consensus among the Jewish demonstrators in Israel, the cost of the occupation and the way that their interrelationships between the occupation and poverty inside Israel were not discussed. And in that sense...
But the struggle in 2003 that was led by a Mizrahi woman failed, and the struggle in 2011 that was led by middle-class Ashkenazi young men and women also failed. So basically,
I'll tell you why they failed. I'll tell you why they failed. In 2003, the Viki Knafo March got international media because there was a lull in the Israel-Palestine conflict. The international media basically covers the Israel-Palestine conflict, and anything within Israeli society is not related to that and therefore is being ignored. Right when Chok HaEsderim, which is a Reaganomic or Thatcheristic law, went into effect, and
the
it
economic
hurt.
arrangements.
Yeah, and it hurt Mizrahim and mainly single mothers. The Hudna was declared, which
That was
was a
in 2003,
ceasefire
yeah.
between Israel and the Hamas. So the foreign media press crop was bored, and they glommed into Knafo land right after the Israeli media. Then, at the end of August or the beginning of September, a suicide bomber slipped through between American colony and the Mizrahi ghetto of Shmuel Lavie.
In Jerusalem.
And I remember that all of the foreign media, their Motorola buzzed, their cell phone buzzed, and in a caravan they sped across town in Jerusalem to cover the carnage of
And
the suicide
completely
bomber.
lost interest.
At that point, the single mother's affair and the Mizrahi protest went off the news. If we go back to 2011, what happened in 2011 was that as the protest gathered momentum, there was a suicide bombing near Eilat. A group of Bedouin guerrilla from the Sinai in 2 cars attacked an Israeli bus. That triggered Israel bombing the Hamas in Gaza, which is over 200 kilometers north of Eilat.
Sure.
The Hamas shot missiles at the Negev. The whole border flared up, and the international media no longer covered the Occupy movement, even to the point that when the 3rd of September demonstration that got to the streets, about 1 million out of the 7-something million citizens of Israel to protest the economic measures. It got very little international media. Mind you, in the Israeli media, it was reported that the government of Israel had intelligence on the time, the date, and approximate time where the suicide bombing was to occur. Ma'ariv, Yediot, and Haaretz reported it in Hebrew. And then Ma'ariv, Yediot, and Haaretz reported that Netanyahu instructed the Secret Service, when they went to the Knesset Security Committee to testify on why the media said that Israel had intelligence and didn't do anything to preempt the suicide bombing, Netanyahu instructed them to shut up. Then Barak went to Davos and said that the biggest problem of Israel is this conjuncture between the security issues and the social unrest issues.
But isn't part of the problem the fact that people keep voting them in? Those people who hijack the real issues and focus on security
Yes,
problems?
it is. It's part of the antinomies of Israeli voting patterns. And my book discusses the history of that, because the people or the parties in charge of the racial formation of Israeli society are socialist labor. It is socialist labor who brought the Yemenis in the 1880s to be laborers. As they wrote and waxed poetic about labor, the Yemenis did their work for them. They were defined as natural laborers. It's socialist labor that brought the immigrants in the 50s and basically derailed them from being middle-class, lower-middle-class Jews in the Arab world to become basically the lumpen proletariat here.
It's funny because on the face of it, socialist would mean doing away with social gaps. But in the Israeli case, it's the complete opposite.
There is lots of scholarship on the fact that basically the Zionist labor socialism in Israel actually is in charge of the income gap and of the racial gap. So in 1977, when the Mizrahim voted for Likud, it was a protest vote. And they continued to vote for the right wing because only through the right wing Mizrahim became movers and shakers of politics. They started from local level politicians in the Likud, and then they moved to the Knesset, they moved to the government. The Begin government was the first government in Israel's history where they didn't have only one Mizrahi as post minister and another Mizrahi as police minister. They had David Lavie, whose daughter now is one of the best parliamentarians in Israel, with Lieberman's party. They had David Lavie as the foreign minister of Israel. So Mizrahim vote for the right, partly because of the underdog, and partly because of the fact that the right, until Bibi and the neoliberal policies, the right took care of them much better than the left.
Yeah, but do you think this is likely to change anytime soon? Because,
No.
40 years on, you see that it
No.
yielded
No.
close to no results.
No, Israel is destined to have social unrest, which it censors. Basically, people who complain about race crimes are guilty of something that is called in Hebrew leid bachyen, which is to be a crybaby. And that's what Ashkenazim say, to censor Mizrahi discrimination. Israeli society, the Jewish society, is always bursting at the seam. And in order to tranquilize that and create a feeling of national unity, there will be cycles of war.
Yeah.
And it's going to continue and continue and continue because people don't give racial class privilege for nothing. And I don't see the Ashkenazi elite just dividing its racial privilege and class privilege. And the Israeli Supreme Court or the court system will never issue any judgments on intra-Jewish racial discrimination. Because can you imagine how the Jewish diaspora will respond to the fact that here you have a Jewish state, a national homeland for the Jews, so no more Holocaust, no more Masada complexes. And that state is basically built on racial principles.
One last question, Smadar, because we're quickly running out of time. I want you to explain briefly the role of bureaucracy in all this, because it is a major component of your argument.
I think that bureaucracy is there to preempt any spirit of resistance. Israel rules its population and get a model of a docile citizen because the little guy or the little woman are busy scurrying around making ends meet, and this includes hours and days of waiting in lines and relying on sheer luck because a bureaucracy is not rational, just in order to get scraps from the state. Now, the elite Ashkenazim usually have an accountant or an attorney on retainer to pull strings for them with a bureaucracy. The little Mizrahi guy, or the Mizrahi woman, and again, we're talking about 50% of the citizenry, spend while away days in lines just to get stuff done. So it robs people of kinship relationship, of family relationship, of community, of solidarity as they fight over the scraps of the state. So a wonderful way to kind of keep everyone docile and submissive is to make them wake up in the morning into their unemployment or underemployment, and in order to get whatever is left of the welfare state, just spend their days in lines and in fighting and in security checks. So at the end of the day, people come with spirits broken, and they're unable to organize against the state. And this goes on and on for generations. And it's also related to epidemiological problems of stress-related ailments that many studies show that the Mizrahi population suffer much more than the Ashkenazi population because of the torture of people having daily experiences wrestling with bureaucracy that is completely absurd. It makes Kafka look like a summer camp.
Sure. And combined with the loyalty to the state. And to right-wing politics, it leaves no way
Mizrahim
out.
love the state.
Yeah. Smadar Lavie, I'm afraid this is all we have time for, but thank you so much for coming in. An award-winning anthropologist and author of Wrapped in the Flag of Israel, Mizrahi Single Mothers and Bureaucratic Torture, was just published in English by Berghan Books. Thank you so much.
Oh, the book is sold out, the first print.
Oh, is it? Okay,
yes.
Well, no luck there. To our listeners, of course, well done you.
Oh, second print is already shipped to those who ordered the book.
Oh, okay. Well, I really encourage you to read it. It's fascinating.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
You've seen the writing on the wall. something better. Your bones are aching with desire to leave this place and find yourself a higher ground to stand on. A higher ground to stand on. And you look very nice. I don't wanna think twice. I just wanna be with you. And in the dark we move through days of hunger. We hungry hearts, we feed each other. We see through all we've lost. Through all we've lost. My tears shine in your eyes. From the same dirt we rise. I just wanna be with you.
You're listening to the Tel Aviv Review here on TLV1. Welcome back. I am now joined here in the studio by Eran Dorfman, who's a senior lecturer in French and literature at Tel Aviv University. He is here to talk about his new book called Foundations of the Everyday, Shock, Deferral, Repetition. It was recently published in English by Rauman and Littlefield. Hello, Eran, and welcome to the Tel Aviv Review.
Hello, thank you very much.
So, as the title suggests, this is a philosophy book, and a highly philosophical one while at it. Even though I have to admit that it reads fluently and you employ many concrete examples to illustrate your points, which is very well done. So, thank you there. But now, more to the point. Your book seeks to explore the margins or the periphery of the everyday experience, the very things in our daily lives that aren't unchanging and monotonous, and the mechanisms that make them such. Do I understand it correctly?
More or less, yes.
Mm-hmm. So please elaborate.
So normally we think about the everyday as something which is banal, ordinary, something that is not very interesting and that we try to escape. So I start my research with this affirmation, but I try to problematize it and to ask, why do we think that the everyday is ordinary? So I do not accept that the everyday is ordinary. What I say is that the everyday is something which repeats itself or allows us by its repetition to understand what happens, what is happening around us. So when something happens, we need immediately to repeat it. We can just simply repeat it in our mind. We can connect it to things that we know already. So there's always something to do with repetition in the everyday. And everyday for me is something that happens every day also. So when something very new, like we find a new friend or someone we love or a new habit, something we really appreciate, we tend to repeat it. So we see this person again and again and again. So why do we do it? In order to get closer to this person or to this thing, but also to better understand it.
But maybe because the dullness that in everyday life is something that's appealing to us. I was just going to ask you. You said that it looks routine is looked down upon by people, and I was thinking, as an Israeli, as people living in Israel, routine is something that is very often coveted. It's something that we are looking forward to.
We appreciate it. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, that is something very interesting what you're saying, because I think that the everyday in Israel is not the everyday in Europe, let's say, or in the United States or in other countries, because there is something in the routine that reassures us. But I think that there is something common about it, that there is in the everyday something reassuring, something that we need. On the other hand, I always ask my students, what do you think about the everyday? What is the connotation? What is the association? So few say home, something that we need, something we appreciate, but most of them say it's a prison, something that we don't like, something we need to escape, it's shitty, it's something they use.
Maybe it's just because we have too much of it.
Well, everything is every day when you think about it, of course. But what interests me is to ask where does this ambiguity come from, and what happens to it, what has happened to it, or what do we do with it in the 20th century, 21st century?
So what are really the mechanisms of this ambiguity? How is it created?
So I call, as you said, the book is entitled Foundations of the Everyday, Shock, Deferral, Repetition. So it's like three mechanisms, or if you like, three foundations of the everyday.
Yeah, let's take them one by one.
Okay, so shock, deferral, repetition. Let's start. Okay, so shock. Shock for me is everything that is a little bit new is perceived by us as shock. So it's not like something very shocking, but everything that goes out of our routine, of our everyday, you can say that it is shocking. I go out to the street, or there is a car coming. It's a tiny shock, so I need to do something about it. Or I see a new person, or I feel some pain in my leg. It's something a little bit shocking. So there are many events in our every day. So these are the shocks. Now, what do we do with these shocks? How do we integrate them, or how do we understand them in the everyday? We need to defer and repeat them. So it's deferral and repetition. So what do I mean by deferral and repetition? Deferral is to stop for a moment your routine and to understand what has happened really. I mean, there is a car there. I need to slow down. I need to go back, or I need to do something about it. So there is a tiny deferral, something that I don't always notice in my life, but I need to halt for a second, to suspend my everyday and to understand this event. And then there is this repetition. I need to, first of all, repeat again, so go back to my everyday. But then I need also to, if it's something interesting, if this shock was something that meant something to me, I want to repeat it. In like I said before, I want to meet this person again, or I need to find a habit. So, for instance, be careful in the street. So I repeat a behavior. And in this way, this event, this shock, is integrated into my everyday life.
But yeah, exactly. But in a sense, this shock is also, or the multitude of shocks is also part of our daily life. So isn't it really incorporated into our daily life, and then it's some kind of never-ending loop?
Exactly. That is why I call the book The Foundations of the Everyday. Foundation is something that is founded, but it is always, in the process of founding itself. The everyday is something, it's a movement, it's a circular movement, because we repeat again and again, but every moment there are many events that go out of the everyday, but they immediately come back to the everyday. That is the principle of the everyday.
In a sense, it's the exception that confirms the rule?
I would say that the everyday is the rule that permits the exception. So, because without the everyday, you would live in a chaotic life. So, let's imagine, and there are some films, Hollywood films, that show people, go out of the streets and they don't understand everything. Everything is alien to them. So, this is like a person or a world without an everyday. It's a world that you cannot really understand. You can do nothing about it. So I would not say exceptional rule, but something that permit each other and complement each other.
Right. It's the healthy tension that brings a better understanding of what the everyday is. Measured against something else that would help shed light on the everyday.
Exactly.
Is that your perspective, your research perspective?
That is the general framework. That is the general structure. And then I try to. That is my starting point. And from this starting point, I begin to investigate why we in late modernity, I would say, why don't we like the everyday? Why do we try to escape it? And then I say that something in this shock, deferral, repetition, in our attitude towards shock, deferral, and repetition has changed.
Yeah, so I want to focus now on this watershed moment in human history, as you say in your book, late modernity. In what sense? Well, first of all, how would you? What are the contours of late modernity? Where does it start and where does it end? And how did it really bring about this radical change?
Okay, so for me, I mean, this is not something that I innovated, and there are many. There have been researchers about the everyday that situated in the mid-19th century, let's say, the Industrial Revolution and the urbanization, secularization, all these processes that in a certain sense have made the everyday problematic. Because before this period, before 19th century, people didn't speak about the everyday. The everyday was not. I looked in dictionaries. The everyday has been used or started to be used as a noun only at 19th century. So.
Why is that?
I think that when there is a problem, people start to speak about it. The everyday has become apparent. And why has it become apparent? Because something in the everyday started to annoy people. They started to say, there is an everyday, there is a routine. I don't like this routine. So, and then...
but I'm trying to understand why now? I mean, because people in the 15th century went out to the field every day, worked from dawn till dusk, went to bed, and their lives were even more monotonous than what we like to call as our dull everyday life. So what is it that opened their eyes? Is it again the onset of these shocks that allowed them to gain an external perspective on their everyday life? With the lack of it before, they just weren't able to see it?
Well, people didn't have time to think about or to reflect about their everyday, perhaps. But on the other hand, also there were many institutions that have structured the everyday, that help people understand these mechanisms of shock, deferral, repetition. For instance, people went every Sunday to the church. There was a very clear split between working days and holidays, and there was a strong community with many repetitious mechanisms. I think that the role of repetition was very strong and very very powerful and very also well structured. Until, let's say, 19th century, it's very rough what I'm saying, but for most people it was like that. And then all the movements, all the changes in daily life have shaken these mechanisms and made people had more free time on the one hand. On the other hand, they went to the factory, so they had less free time. But then they went home and they were very tired. But then they started to ask themselves, why do I do it? So all this balance that you talked about between event, between routine have started to be shaken.
Is every day something that can be perceived as an ideal? I mean, the things were simpler back then before the everyday became a problem?
I don't think so. Because Well, I think I like problems. I think when there is a problem, there is also a way to invest.
No, sure, for you as a scholar, but I'm talking about
I mean,
ordinary people.
I mean as a person.
Okay.
As a person,
Oh,
I don't think that work in the field. We don't. There are many people, especially in the late 19th century. We see many sociologists that romanticized, that said, "Oh, people before were much more calm. They had like a strong community." I don't think so. I think that they were maybe miserable, but we cannot. But in a way that was too well organized, and so they could not escape it. We have the freedom to shape.
Did the decline of religion in life at large contribute to that? Was this a significant factor, or just one out of many?
It is one of, I think, religion. One of when you look at all religions, cult ceremonies are the basics, and these are all related to repetition. I think that this repetition is trying to take the repetition of the everyday. We have 24 hours, and then they repeat, and there is something which doesn't make sense in this every day to go to sleep and to wake in the morning. And religion makes sense into it, and then it permits one to like or to better appreciate, to better appropriate his or her everyday life. Whereas the decline of repetition, we see now a rise in decline of religion, I wanted to say. We see now a rise in religion because people need this mechanism. People need to better understand the repetition. And all the book is about what has happened to the repetition, why we don't like it, and how can we like again repetition without going to adhering like religion. Or I also analyze fascism as a very powerful regime of repetition, because fascism, when you think about it, it's all about repeating the same and the same and the same, and make the everyday sublime, and the repetition becoming very beautiful with uniforms, etc. But it's very appealing and it's very dangerous.
Right. So basically, our problem as human beings is that we're always after some sort of structure.
And on the other hand, we are looking for in beginning from, let's say, 20th century, we're looking for events. We're looking for something for adventures.
Yeah, but as you say, they are sucked into our structure all the time. So this tension, it continues to exist.
So I think when the structure is starting to be shaken, people are looking for more like adventures, more very rapid. We see it in sexual life of contemporary sexual life, people looking for adventures, people looking for short-term things. But deep inside, I would say, people say, I would like to have something more structured, but there is no ability to really understand how to gain it. And I think that the everyday is something, on the investigation of the everyday is something very important to understand how to find the structure without repressing this need for adventures or for events.
Tell me a bit about the foundations of your scholarly work here, the philosophical foundations of it. Were the writers and thinkers that you based your work on were predominantly French? Is it just a coincidence that you're a lecturer in French and writing about philosophy, or is it something that is mutually complementary?
Well, as the everyday, it's always a mixture of coincidence and something more essential. But I did my PhD in Paris, so I was very influenced by French theory, French thought, and there is also a French style of thinking. I think that there is something. I think that they have some freedom of playing with authors in a non-philological or non-orthodox way. So I start the book with phenomenology. It's Husserl, Heidegger, Merleau-Ponty, but I play with them. I found mechanisms of deferral, of suspension, of repetition. So, and I mean, scholars, like very orthodox scholars of Heidegger, would be maybe shocked by what I'm saying, because I try to
deconstruct.
Deconstruct.
Oh, sorry. I know. Oh, sorry. It's a connoted term. It's very loaded.
It's a very good word, deconstruct. It's just that
it means something else.
And I'm influenced also by deconstruction, but I also like to deconstruct, construct, reconstruct. So it's like we do in the everyday. And then I go to psychoanalysis, for instance. But I think that there is something in the French culture, in French philosophy, in French thought that permits this fluid mechanism, which for me it's very beautiful because I tried to say something about the everyday, about fluidity, about structure, about this balance between them, and I tried in the book also to demonstrate it in the way I investigate.
Can you give a few examples about how you were influenced by what you call the French way of thinking?
Good. It's a good question to find examples.
Or maybe just explain in more detail what you mean by the French way of thinking.
Mm-hmm. I think that when you see, especially from the 60s onwards, you see in France many books that are extremely interdisciplinary, that may be philosophical as my book, but it's not. I don't consider my book to be a pure philosophical book because I use lots of cultural studies, psychoanalysis, examples from literature, and I have the pretension to be maybe an intellectual or someone who is trying to cover many fields of the humanities, but of human knowledge. I think that is something very French. So maybe it's also my weakness. It's pretentious, and maybe I don't know if I succeeded in it or not. But I think that there is something in the United States, for instance, in American scholars are much more specialized in their fields, and there are some fascinating interdisciplinary studies. But it's something that I think that the French are very strong in it. So it's more the style than the concrete, thinkers which are French.
Well, I encourage our listeners now to see whether you lived up to this high expectation as a pseudo-French scholar or whatever. Dr. Eran Dorfman, senior lecturer in French and literature at Tel Aviv University, author of Foundations of the Everyday, Shock, Deferral, Repetition. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you very much, Gilad. It was a pleasure.
Blue jeans, white shirt, walked into the room, you made my eyes burn. It was like James Dean, for sure. You're so fresh to death and sick as cancer. You're so punk rock, I grew up on hip-hop, but you fit me better than my favorite sweater. And I know that love is mean, and love hurts, but I still remember that day we met in December. Oh baby, I will love you till the end of time. I would wait a million years. Promise you'll remember that you're mine. Baby, can you see through the tears? Love you more than those pictures before. Say you'll remember, baby. Say you'll remember, baby. Ooh, I will love you till the end of time. Big dreams, gangsta. Said you had to leave to start your life over. I was like, no, please, stay here. We don't need no money, we can make it all work. But he headed out on Sunday, said he'd come on Monday. I stayed up waiting, anticipating and pacing, but he was chasing paper. Caught up in the game, it was the last I heard. I will love you till the end of time. I would wait a million years. wished you tried. But when you walked out the door, a piece of me died. Told you I wanted more, it's not what I had in mind. Just wanted like before, we were dancing all night. Then they took you away, stole you out of my life. We just need to remember. I will love you till the end of time. I would wait a million years. Promise you'll remember that you're mine. Baby, can you see through the tears? Love you more than those pictures before. Say you'll remember. Say you'll remember, baby. Ooh, I will love you till the end of time.
That was the Tel Aviv Review for this week. Thank you very much for listening. Do join us again next week for another edition of the Tel Aviv Review. In the meantime, don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and do not hesitate to get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I am Gilad Halpern. Big thanks to Adam Scher, the technical producer of this show. Hope to see you again next week. Until then, bye and Shana Tova.
And when the nighttime falls, I can hear you in my walls. Your burned out lonely call. Please let me see your smile again. I'm standing in the rain, waiting for the gospel train. I know I wait in I'm running through the barley straw, my hideout from the law. Girl, I miss you to my bones. I'm feeling most alone. A sprinkle of your fairy dust awakening my lust. Breathe it in as if I must. It's trickling through my crust. It was written in the stars in centuries afar, like a fly trapped in a jar, my pocket full of scars. An expedition for the truth, the blossom of your youth. Since I sowed the seeds of sin, I'm burning from within.